It's my honor today to remind you of the face and the voice that is about to come to the platform is somebody who's been active in our community for a long time. Maturing in her spiritual life and her journey, Dr. Catherine Burton became a licensed Unity teacher. And as she continues to serve in our community, this happens to be the first time she's come to the platform on the microphone as our Sunday speaker. And I hope you will grandly welcome Dr. Catherine Burton, who asks for her lay later. Dr. Catherine Burton.
Thank you so much. Aloha. It's so wonderful to be here. In fact, it's so wonderful to be here. It's almost hard for me to be here because it's so wonderful to be here. And I am here today to speak with you about our minister as our mirror. And you know, when a church and congregation call forth a time of a new minister, it invariably signifies a new step in their spiritual unfoldment, a new stage. Think about it. A new minister brings in new experiences, new ideas, new opportunities for our soul's development. But as we know in Unity, we attract what comes into our field by what we hold in consciousness, and even more importantly, that fifth step of Unity principles, by how we practice in our lives and in our spiritual practice. And that's what's going to attract. And in the end, it is God that appoints and anoints the new minister for us, knowing exactly where we are, what we need, and where our next step is. So today, I want to talk about and have us reflect on where we are so we'll know what we're attracting. And we're going to do this in three ways. We're going to look at, first, our relationship with the minister, and then where we are on the path with the church, and then where we are in realizing our own divine identity with God in the next few minutes. And so first I want to speak with you about where we are in our relationship to the minister, and I want to do this kind of in a developmental life stage, infant to elder perspective. And so we could be in an infant stage, by which I mean this is our first experience of church. There are people who are infants. They've never even experienced a minister in their entire life. Wow. And we know two things about infants. They're just very authentic. It's just they have their experience, and we know something else. What they really tune into is connection. And you'll hear new people say, boy, I feel connected to that minister or to the teaching, or I feel connected to this place and that community. So that's important for us to remember about new people as well. The next stage is the parent stage, in which, from a spiritual perspective now, we could see ourselves as children of God, and the minister as kind of a parent to reparent us, to possibly born again, but to reparent us to enter the kingdom of heaven. Oh, that's very different from the parenting in the world, isn't it? So that's an interesting thing. You might be there. Yeah, I'm needing to be reparented because that wasn't sufficient, what I was raised with. The next step is the adolescent stage, and it's hard for me not to smile when I say the word adolescent, because we all kind of know in adolescence things really change up a bit. And in adolescent, you want to know one thing. And I thank Reverend Denise about this. We hear this every week in our nonviolent communication class, which is our feelings are signals about what we need. And if they're happy feelings, it means our needs are being met. And if we're unhappy, it means our feelings are probably not being met, and we need to do something about it. But that's also our responsibility. So in adolescence, we have a lot of feelings. We don't want to necessarily be a child anymore, and we're not quite an adult, and there are these authority figures and rules. And so we have to track our feelings. But the key is this, is that if you're upset in your adolescent phase with the minister, the answer isn't always get rid of the minister. The answer is possibly to grow up. And that's, in fact, what we did in Unity, right? We were kind of adolescents, and then we grew up into adulthood, and we're actually then sort of moving on. So that's a key. And that takes us into the adult stage. And in the adult stage, you're really looking at, how do I live my life now in this new spiritual way? Because that's what it's about. You're connecting. The self is in the heart, and that's where God is. And you're connecting with that. But what does that mean now for my life? And that can lead us. And then let's say you've been an adult for 20 years, and now you're maybe a kapuna, and you're like, okay, now what's there? And that's the mature stage. Is there something there for me? Yes. The mature stage is, how do we mature into our practice? And we're oftentimes giving back with that. The other thing I have to smile about a mature phase is you'll see a lot of people in that phase get really strong on morality. And it's probably because they have adolescent kids and they know there needs to be some. I remember like a lot of the North Shore people instantly, in their 50s and 60s went back to church. So there that is. The next to the last stage is the elder stage, where we become kapuna and looking for wisdom. And that's the minister that can really give us the universal teachings and wisdom and guide us. And yet there's a final stage, the stage of realization. And in India, seekers go around looking for who is the most God-realized master they know, and then they give their life to them in service. And in the Western tradition, Christ is, I opened up a dictionary and it said, the priest, in this dictionary, it said, is the representation of Christ in the church. And in the Bible it says Christ is the head of the church. So we could look at how realized are we, how realized is the minister, and what is our next step for realization. So I want you to just take a moment right now and think about, where are you on that stage? Because God's going to deliver what you need for your next stage. And it's important to know not only the stage you're in, but your next stage, because that's your growth stage. Okay. Now what I want to do is talk about where we are in our relationship to Unity Church, and I want to talk about it in terms of Unity's positive path to spiritual living. And they have 5 steps in that, and I've added 2. So let's go through this, and again, see where you are and see where your next step is, because that will call forth these potentials from the next minister. The first step is seeker. Many people are maybe connected to Unity without ever being in a church. They read the daily word. They go online. They partake in a 12-step program we used to have, or the bereavement group, or the counseling center, or the wellness center. Wow. And these are all people seeking for their lives and having found things through Unity. Isn't that interesting? And then they might say someday, gee, this is kind of a cool church. I'm going to go check out that Sunday service, check out these people. And so that's the second stage which I'm adding, which is the Sunday service attendee. And some people spend the rest of their life, that's what they do. That's, it's Sunday service. That's their time of refreshment and renewal each week. And they look forward to that, and also the time afterwards of connecting with the congregation. Now, the third stage, I'm smiling again, is the stage where you suddenly see the Unity bookstore, and this is Adolescent Unity bookstore, and all the classes. Now, that took me about 5 minutes to get to that stage, because I'm such a perpetual student. And you then realize, wow, there's so much more here, and you start getting into the reading and getting into the classes. So that's the student stage. And then you begin to go like, wow, this is really an extraordinary place. I want to start giving back, and maybe you took a prosperity course and realized, yeah, that's that law of circulation. I've received a lot, let me give a lot, and then you even prosper more because it's all coming from God. And so that's the supporter stage, where you really start to make your commitment to the church financially, because it is our donations that pay for the monthly expenses. And then something happens, And you might feel like, wow, what's the next thing to do? And I remember this moment in life because it changed my experience of unity. And I had worked with the Sunday school kids for 5 years, and that was kind of complete. And I was just down in the courtyards, and someone came up and talking about prosperity. And she said, my life changed when I started volunteering at Unity. And I went, wow, I never thought of that. And I immediately the next week volunteered to serve 4 hours in the front office at the front desk, figuring, I'd get all the scoops happening there. So it was terrific. That changed my life at Unity, so much so that I became a volunteer after that forever. And even when I was going to the mainland, because I just retired, should I move to the mainland, go to these other spiritual communities? I'd always come back. I'd go, it's Unity. It's Unity. This is my home. And that's when Unity became a community for me, because I connected to the people. And that leads to the 2 final stages of the steward. You might be such a volunteer that you know something, and you're helping out either in a board committee, a board member, a licensed Unity teacher, head of the ushers, or head of something, and you're helping to lead and govern the church. Very important, because you see, we're all that adult, mature elder. And then there's a final stage I added. And the final stage is feeling like, wow, this isn't the end of it. There's a call to ministry here. And you feel that call to help represent the Christ or lead people to that divine identity inside. And I'm going to say something here. There are 4 people, 4 of us, who on this island, licensed Unity teachers, including myself, because I just turned in my application to become a minister at Unity 2 days ago. And there are 4 of us on this island ready to enter a ministerial program. Isn't that something? I think that's just outrageous. So thank you, God. So now that's where we are in our path to unity. Take a moment and see where you are and what's the next step for you, because I followed that path. I am probably the biggest advocate of that path. That was the path I took. And finally, I want to now spend some time with you and talking about where you are and we are in our realization of our own divine identity, which some people call our divine self or the Christ within us. And for this, I am going to use the 7 covenants in the Bible, 6 from the Old Testament and 1 from the Master. And these are the 7 and only 7 covenants, not commandments, covenants. Covenant means agreement, that God says, here's the covenant between you and me. If you follow this covenant, here's what I will do. And God lays it out. And you'll become familiar with this. The first one with is Adam. Adam, you can eat of the tree of in the tree of life in the garden of consciousness. But, and here's our 1-minute metaphysics, but do not take into your experience the fruit, the consequences, the karma, of the knowledge, okay, you now know what that's like, of the tree, your spinal column, or other spiritual bodies, of good and evil, of duality. Because on that day, you fall from grace. You fall from oneness. Does that make sense? Wow. That's the first covenant. And what that covenant is saying is be connected to God and to the life of God. True. The next one is the flood comes, the last ice age. Flood comes, and God has got to reboot civilization. How does he reboot it? He chooses Noah, and Noah was called in the Bible the most moral person and humble. Not moral and arrogant, moral and humble. And so he says to Noah, here's the covenant, build yourself an ark and bring your family into it, Noah, the most moral person. So the family is the ark. And if you do this, and if you stay in line with the moral sanctity connected to me and the family, you will rise above the troubled waters and land on the land, state of consciousness, I plan to bring you to. That was Noah. So the second one, the second covenant, is maintaining the moral sanctity of our family and of our sexuality, which generates the next generations. That's the key. The third one is Abraham. God asked Abraham to leave Ur, sounds like error, in Babylon, who are starting to worship the four gods of profit, power, pleasure, and approval. And he leaves. And with his great faith in God, his generosity, he goes down to essential needs. And that's the third one, is following the essential needs of us. You know you're in that third stage when you've gotten the big job, the big money, and you start saying, wow, am I selling out here? Is this what it's about? I got to get back to myself, back to what's real, back to the land. That's that third stage. In comes then the fourth stage, Moses, with the commandments. And those are how to live in right relationship with each other so bad things don't happen. Okay, so don't kill, steal, lie, cheat, deceive, commit adultery, or covet anybody else's market share so that that doesn't happen to you, right? And we do that by staying connected to God, keeping that name of God, the I Am in us, holy when making great decisions like marriage and parenting and work. And we honor God and honor what lives our life. And we have a time of rest and renewal. And we keep that holy, that Sabbath. We don't use it as time to get wasted. So, for 10 commandments, it kind of covers a lot of territory of how to stay on the path. The fifth one is the most important, and it's how we're led into the promised land of consciousness in ourselves. And that's Joshua. And that is... And God says this over and over again. You want to be governed by fair judges who keep the teachings and laws in front of you and who are trained, educated, licensed with experience. You don't want kings, dictators, and mentally ill tyrants leading you. You want fair judges. You want to live, and this is our society is having to figure out how to live by the laws and wisdom. And then finally, God says, and listen to the prophets. And the prophets are the one who tell us how God designed us to live. And our scientists are modern day prophets, and they are really finding that. And you can really see that in medicine because they're finding if you eat the food that God designed us to do, some more plants, more vegetables, you'll get healthier. And if you eat all the rest of stuff, which is really about pleasure and pain, you won't be as healthy. So they're finding that one out. And then finally comes the one from the Master. The one from the Master right before he goes into his passion and he's with his disciples and he's just had communion with them. And he says, and I give you a new commandment, a new covenant based on my blood. Blood is the life, based on my life. And he said, this is how you will realize the Christ within you. And how you do that? By loving as you have been loved by God and by the Christ in me. And that Christ in you will then be realized. And if you think about it, you have to kind of bow your head and say, yeah, that's it. When we are at that level, we are realizing God. So take a moment then to see where you are. And in unity, we find our ways, like this path becomes very practical. You went into the 12-step meeting and you cleared the alcoholism. The next thing you did, I got to clear my relationship. You went to a nonviolent communication meeting. Then you went to a prosperity class and learned how to discern your purpose, how to use your talents to go to work in ways that serve real needs. And then you started growing in your own ways of finding your deeper values and virtues by coming to the church. And then you started leading that life of integrity by following those universal laws and by coming into that realization of yourself and finally connecting deeply with God and God's love. So take a sense of where you are. And I would now like to end this time together in a meditation and to really let us recognize that where we are is what we're calling forth for our next time of our next spiritual unfoldment, our glorious unfoldment, as we just heard. And I want us to call forth our highest prayers right now. And I actually want to take a moment of silence for you to put forth your prayer and seed the field of what you want to realize in this next stage of our growth, of our unfoldment. And as you do that, I want you to call forth the blessings of that time, of this time, and our highest practices, because here's what I want to say. Charles Fillmore said that the Christ is the incarnating principle in humanity. And the intensity we are feeling, I'm getting tears in my eyes, the intensity that we are feeling right now is the intensity of Christ being born collectively in us, individually in our church, and wanting to be born in our society through our works. That is what's happening. We're in a pregnant moment, whether you're male or female, of this birth of the Christ that's wanting to come forth. Let us let that birth happen. Let us be in guidance, and let this be a very holy time so that it truly becomes a time in our future history of glorious unfoldment of ourselves and our church and the divinity on our planet. And so I say, thank you, God, and so it is. Amen.